So on to our next speaker. Captain Rosie Wild is a British Army officer serving with the 7th Parachute Regiment Royal Horse Artillery. Rosie, when she was a cadet here, was awarded the Sword of Honour when she commissioned from the Royal Military Academy in 2017. And uniquely, she is the first female in history to complete the All Arms P Company course for selection and service with in an airborne role with 6th Air Assault Brigade, including specifically last year on op pitting in Afghanistan. Continuing our strong sporting theme from this morning, in 2019, Rosie represented Great Britain in the European Triathlon Championships as well. Rosie, it's a privilege to have you here with us today. Very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and good afternoon. I'm going to talk today about high performance, but high performance culture, high performing teams, and the high performing individuals that I believe that we sow and nurture in the Army, and particularly within 16 Air Assault Brigade Combat Team. And I feel particularly privileged to be able to speak as a fairly junior officer about this, because I'm not the expert. I'm actually just a practitioner of the leadership values and high performance values and high performance culture that at the moment I feel like we really nourish. If I jump around a bit, it's because I spent all morning writing notes from all the other speakers that that came on today, because I've been so inspired by everyone that I've listened to. And what I think is fantastic about high performance culture is that it is so adaptable and changing, and we learn so much every day by anyone from any background. So to start what I want to say, I want to try and summarize what high performance means to me. And the reason I want to say this now is because I feel like as I go into talking about the different levels of high performance, and from, let's say, from the hypothesis and the philosophy of high performance, where in the Army we might call that the strategic level, all the way down to the application implementation of high performance, what we might call the tactical level, and then all the way to the individual, in this case, myself, Rosie Wild. Again, all thoughts on my own. But I just want to get across what my idea of high performance is, so that you can see that golden thread running through from, let's say, top to bottom. High performance to me just does not mean high success. I believe you can be high performing and never win anything. As long as you're adopting the processes and analysis of performing to the absolute best of your abilities, and you're challenging yourself, you're challenging your body, you're challenging your mind, then you're high performing. If you're pushing those limits, you're high performing. Fairly long-winded. I listened to a really, really interesting TED talk recently by a woman called Brené Brown, who wrote the book Daring Greatly. And she said, vulnerability is our most accurate way to measure courage. And I think in a military context, that phrase in itself could be pulled apart and become a huge discussion when we talk about courage as one of our core values, but having vulnerability in order to measure it. But I'm going to sort of flip it around and rearrange it and make it about self-development, high performance and achievement. I don't believe that you measure high performance on trophies or medals or rank. I believe that you measure it against the size of challenge that you're willing to set yourself, the level of commitment you offer, and the passion you give. So what I mean by that is that the amount of challenge, commitment, and passion that you are willing to sacrifice or offer equates to the level of high performance that the output of your high performance. So in sum, challenge is our most accurate way to measure high performance. You have to be vulnerable in order to be brave. You have to be challenged in order to achieve high performance. And what I think is even more wonderful about this is that the only person who can actually quantify the challenge, the value of your challenge and commitment and passion is you yourself, the individual. But if I rewind a bit, I'm here in most part representing 16 Air Assault Brigade Combat Team, of which I am one individual member. And I'm part of a really small team that's part of a subunit, which belongs to a unit, which belongs to the brigade. And so what I want to talk about is how everything that happens at brigade, the way we think, the culture of the brigade, rolls down that golden thread to the unit, to the subunit, to the team, to the individual. And I'm going to try and split this into 3 parts that I've sort of worked out in my head. And these 3 parts are why we are, how we are, and who we are. And please understand, this is not doctrine. This is not SOIs. This is not something that we're told to think. This is the way that I have interpreted the ethos and the character of the brigade. So why we are, I want to cover the Pegasus ethos. I'll introduce and I'll explain the Pegasus ethos to you. And I want to talk about strategic leadership and the intent of the brigade and how that breeds high-performing teams. Why we do what we do, why high performance happens. How we are, we'll cover more about how we translate that ethos into practice at a tactical level on the ground or in camp. How we lead and how we train to achieve high-performing teams. And I'll use a vignette from Operation Pitting last year. So how we do what we do, how high performance happens. And finally, who we are. To me, this is the most important part. And this is the ever-changing part, which is why I wrote notes all morning. This will cover who we are as high-performing individuals, what motivates us, what inspires us, what we seek and what we own, but also what hampers us, what threatens us and what we fear or what we risk. We talk a lot about risk in the Army. I say us here, but naturally this part is particular to me. But that's also wonderful. There are 6,000 people in 16 Air Assault Brigade combat team, and for every single experience or application of the ethos, there will be 6,000 individual, valid and edifying ways of interpreting it and applying the Pegasus ethos. So this is just how I do it. And I'll talk about how I relates to us later when I talk about collective goals. So who we are really is about who makes high performance happen. So I'll start with why we are and the Pegasus ethos. And I will read this to you verbatim, the Pegasus ethos. As British airborne soldiers, we place the mission and our comrades before ourselves. Our bravery is founded upon determination, endurance, and selflessness. We are supremely disciplined, and that discipline is primarily self-imposed. We take pride in being part of an elite, and we understand our responsibility to strive for the highest standards of achievement, turnout, and attitude. We wear Pegasus with humility, recognizing our obligation never to demean or diminish the value of others. We are a compassionate friend, but a ferocious enemy. In battle, in barracks, and at home, we always do the right thing. And that's it. That's our ethos. That's the Pegasus ethos. It's, to me, it's clear, it's confident, and it's important. There are so many adjectives in there you can highlight to describe an airborne soldier: determination, endurance, bravery, selflessness, discipline. But I actually want to draw your attention to 2 words that you probably didn't even notice I said, and they are we and our. These words, to me, are indicative of an organization whose collective goal it is to be high-performing, to be a high-performing team. We are the Very High Readiness Brigade. We are the tip of the spear of the British Army, and we're ready to deploy around the world at short notice by whatever means necessary to serve the interests of our nation. We do that together. Our brigade, our combat team, are the custodians of the maroon beret, with everyone has a Pegasus on their left arm and wings on our right arms. We all wear the same uniform that were worn by airborne soldiers past and will be worn by airborne soldiers to come. This is the legacy, and I'm sure nearly everyone on this call has read James Kerr's Legacy. It's about looking after the uniform that's going to be worn by those to come. And it all accumulates with the airborne motto, which states ad unum omnes, all to one end. And that to me is a collective goal. Having an ethos reminds us that what we deliver as an output is as conceptual and moral as it is physical. And this is what I would call the passion. Having self-imposed discipline and responsibility in our output, that's our commitment. and doing it all with humility and self-sacrifice, whilst valuing everyone around us. That's the challenge. Now, every individual in the Pegasus that takes on Pegasus ethos, everyone in that team will have varying amounts of each of those adjectives: the determination, the endurance, the bravery. And that's exactly right, because the diversity of a team and the understanding of an individual's strengths and weaknesses is what makes it strong and successful. And it was only earlier that Ben Fennell mentioned the Spanish football team, who didn't have a star striker and nobody thought they were going to win. But then they won the game 4-1, because it wasn't about one player, it was about the whole team. And we live that in the brigade. And that, to me, is why we are high performing. How we are high performing in the brigade is a lot more practical. It's about the training and the leadership at the tactical level. And I just want to mention something that we all talk about in the airborne world, which are the words of Field Marshal Montgomery. He said, "What manner of men are these who wear the maroon beret? They are firstly volunteers, toughened by physical training. As a result, they have infectious optimism and that offensive eagerness which comes from well-being. They have jumped from the air, and by doing so, they have conquered fear. They have the highest standards in all things, whether it be skill in battle or smartness in the execution of all peacetime duties. They are, in fact, men apart, every man an emperor." Those words are so important. And the reason they're important is that everybody that wears wings on their shoulder has milled and been punched in the face multiple times in front of these words painted on a wall at P Company. Everybody has been through the same process. Every soldier and officer who serves in the brigade has chosen to be here. They're the volunteers. They've accepted the challenge of the pre-parachute selection course, and in doing so, they've shown a commitment and a passion to a collective cause. But passing the course is only the start of the journey. And these same soldiers relentlessly train and exercise themselves physically and mentally to maintain the highest standards in all things. We train to fight, but I don't just mean fixing a bayonet and closing and killing in with the enemy. I don't just mean calling in offensive fires. It actually just means training to be ready to do anything at any time. And my vignette that I'll use for this is Operation Pitting. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody in the world that doesn't remember what they were doing in August 2021, when for 18 months, the news had been completely overrun with the COVID-19 pandemic. And suddenly the eyes of the world shifted to Kabul, where the Taliban had entered the capital and they had taken Afghanistan in a single day. The president had fled, the Western embassies had now abandoned their posts, and thus was triggered the mass evacuation of tens of thousands of men and women and children from the country. And it was here in just outside HK Airport in a small hotel called the Baron Hotel, where the 2nd Parachute Regiment battle group established and executed one of the largest non-combatant evacuation operations in history. We call that a NEO. It was here that soldiers and officers from 16th Air Assault Brigade combat team deployed with some for a day, some a few hours notice, with one task: evacuate all British nationals and eligible Afghans safely and quickly. This was our collective goal. A NEO was not in our day-to-day training. I'm usually with my small team, we're practicing calling in fires and wiping out grid squares with area weapons. This time, we were being asked to achieve a task, the magnitude and complexity of which nobody could have appreciated or predicted. The preparation for the NEO was, at the tactical level, rudimentary at best. But it was helmed by professional and competent airborne soldiers who understood the intent, the goal. Down to the most junior commander, the autonomy was absolutely vast. And ideas and initiatives were being shared at all levels. And this allowed a collaborative effort to achieve shared success. Section commanders, who are normally trained in small arms assaults and offensive actions, were now quickly having to understand the nuances of the British visa system. They were having to filter people from a crowd of young, weak, defenseless civilians and try and find the right people and help the right people. Private soldiers were given riot equipment, who in training were taught to defend against hardcore rioters, but this time they weren't defending against hardcore rioters. They were protecting defenseless civilians. It was a huge challenge, but one that the brigade seized and wore with a level of commitment and passion that can only be attributed to the high-performing teams it yields through the Pegasus ethos. And that's why and that's the high-performing culture that you see at all levels throughout the brigade. And that's from training, preparation, and execution. And that is how we are high-performing. Who we are. Who we are. Every individual has their own leadership style, their own reasons to be motivated, their own application of the Pegasus ethos or of any ethos in their organization or family. And it's our own license to develop, hone, and nurture that. At the beginning, I said that challenge is the most accurate way to measure high performance. Now, challenge, in many ways, people will consider to be a negative term. People will see a challenge as a setback or an obstacle, but I see it completely the opposite. If you Google the definition of a challenge, you'll get some of the results like this. A challenge is something new and difficult which requires great effort and dedication. A test of one's abilities or resources in a demanding but stimulating undertaking. A demanding task that calls for special effort or dedication, or something that needs great mental or physical effort. This is the crux of high performance. You have to be willing to undertake something that will test your abilities and your mental, physical, and conceptual capacity in order to achieve it. For an aspiring airborne soldier, that might be the physical effort of getting fit for P Company, or it could be taking on the great mental effort of jumping out of a plane. Or it could be more intangible, like calling for a special dedication within yourself to actually embody an ethos, the Pegasus ethos. The great thing about this, though, is, like I said at the beginning, you are the quantifier of your high performance. You decide what success looks like. Is success a result, a destination, a medal, a goal, or is it the process, the journey? And I found it really interesting earlier that Heather Stanning said that for her, it was the process, but for Helen, her partner, it was the result, because both can still work. For me, though, I believe that the process is the way it works. I believe that high performance comes from a myriad of efforts and personal achievements. I have never, and I will never win an Olympic medal. I will never race on the world stage running or cycling, but I will still almost every day wake up before the sun rises and I will go on a run or I'll go on a bike ride because I'm passionate about it, I'm committed to it, and I love the challenge. The challenge to win, rarely, but to perform, yeah, every time. And finding the passion and commitment within yourself, especially for something that's not physical or tangible, finding intrinsic motivation, to me, that actually widens the realm and breadth of where your high performance could actually take you. But being intrinsically motivated does come with something that I think is really difficult for a lot of people to swallow. And that is not allowing yourself to fear failure. This is really, really important to me, especially because I think I see it a lot in the younger generation, especially the younger soldiers within the brigade and the wider army. Being motivated because you fear failure can take a huge toll on a person's belief in their own abilities and confidence to achieve goals. If you fear failure, then you only leave yourself with two options, and that's winning or losing. But it isn't that black and white. There's so much stuff in between. Direct success or winning is actually just a self-imposed restriction, and it doesn't offer any room for growth or development or learning lessons. When I was in junior term at Sandhurst, I injured my knee and I had to have it reconstructed. And it was the fourth time I'd had to have one of my knees reconstructed. I was placed in the Lucknow Rehabilitation Platoon, which historically, reputationally, was a huge mark, a huge delay, a real obstacle in the path that I thought I was on. But I realized that external circumstances had absolutely no impact on marring my internal motivations, my commitment and passion to develop as an officer, develop as a leader. So I used that time in rehab and time in the platoon to find room to grow and to develop and to learn lessons about myself and overcoming adversity. And then as a result, when I went back on course, I just had a completely different mindset. And I really enjoyed every moment of it. And luckily went on to win the Sword of Honour. But I think that just happened because I was just being myself and being authentic and actually just taking in what was around me. A few years later, into my junior officership, I actually found myself at a point where I didn't feel challenged anymore. And that in turn meant that I felt less committed and I felt less passionate about what I was doing, because I felt like I didn't have that cause anymore. So I decided that I wanted to serve with airborne forces, and I wanted to be a part of 16 Air Assault Brigade combat team, because the history that they had, the infamy, the soldiers they produced, the officers they produced, everything about them, just the ethos was something that I wanted to be a part of. And I found my challenge. To do that, I had to pass P Company. And I remember having a really frank conversation with my battery commander at the time. Everybody had been asking me before the course, oh, are you worried you're not going to pass? Do you think you're fit enough? Do you think they're going to let a woman pass? Because at the time, well, even now, the pass rate for men is 35%, and the pass rate at the time for women was 0%. But I remember so clearly saying to my BC at the time, I am so excited to do something I might actually fail at. And I really mean that. And it was true then, and it's true now. I was so excited at the prospect of finding my physical and mental limits, and either pushing them and seeing how far they could go, or realizing, actually, no, that is your limit, Rosie, you can't go any further. But why not go and try and find them? I was excited to do that. It was a personal challenge, and it meant that my commitment and my passion and everything I did just soared. And I could have come off course on any day of the course, and I still know that I would have felt as fulfilled and proud as I did the day I passed. And the reason I say that is because since then, people have asked me what it's like to be a trailblazer. And my answer is really simple, is that I'm not a trailblazer. There are girls that attempted the course before me. There are men that attempted the course before me, and they didn't pass. But it does not mean that they did not apply themselves in every single which way they could to find the high performance. The path for me to pass the course had already been paved by those that went ahead of me. And it might be easy to say this in hindsight because I won the sword or I passed the course. But I have one more anecdote for you, sorry. And it happened 3 days ago, just on Sunday. I had a bike race, a 60-mile bike race in Chelmsford, a national road race, cycling race. And I was against a field of really high quality and experienced riders. I knew they all had the experience and handling skills and fitness to outmaneuver me and outbeat me tactically throughout the whole race. I knew, though, that I had the power, endurance, and determination to wear them down and push them harder for long enough that they wouldn't be able to use their tactics against me. I was once told when it comes to cycling that in order to win a race, you have to be willing to lose the race. So I made the decision that what I would do is about 10 miles into the race, I would set off and I would grind the whole peloton down so that they couldn't attack, and that I would tire them out, and then I would kick up another gear and I would seek victory. And I knew that if it didn't work, I would fail. If I couldn't find that extra gear, then I would not win. I would fall off the back. I would absolutely lose the race. But I was willing to do it because I wanted the challenge, and I was excited to see what my limit was. And I knew that if I just stayed in the peloton, I wasn't going to get anything out of it at the end if I knew I hadn't pushed myself. I was drawing on that determination and endurance that we find in the Pegasus ethos to be the best that I could be. And I'm just thinking of a comment that we had earlier where someone said, Army be the best is contradictory to embracing failure, but I completely disagree. You can embrace failure, you can pursue failure, but also be the best. So I did that. About 15 miles from the end, I kicked up another gear and I set off, absolutely buried myself. And guess what happened? Of course, I did not win the race. I dragged the peloton for 10 miles of the headwind. They overran me at the line, and technically I lost the race. But I also exhibited 100 kilometers of absolute commitment, passion, and challenge dedicated determination and effort. And that's what I call high performance. And I can say that, and I can call myself high performing because, like I said at the beginning, I'm the one that quantifies what high performance is. It all comes down to being willing to challenge yourself to achieve, like being willing to be vulnerable in order to be courageous. And just one more part for me is that I was crippled coming here to speak today with imposter syndrome. I didn't feel like I had any credibility or experience to talk about high performance or high performing teams when the panel looked like they do today. But my final story is that when I was on P Company, a few weeks after I passed, I was taking my smock out that I'd worn in the events, and I took out a piece of paper from my pocket, and I remember putting it in there. And I had a calendar at the time when I was on the course where you ripped off a day, a page every day, and it gave you a different quote. And the quote on the first day of test week was, "Be strong, you never know who you are inspiring." And I remember reading it and thinking, that's really true. Who cares? Like, my high performance inspires somebody, even if I can't always inspire myself. So I folded the piece of paper, put it in my smock pocket, and I passed the course. And I always think about that quote now when I have this imposter syndrome, because everybody inspires somebody. And that gave me enough courage to come and speak today and actually feel like I can talk about high performance because I've quantified it, defined it for myself, and somebody somewhere will be inspired by that. So just in summary, I wanted to talk today about why we are, how we are, and who we are. Why we are is all about finding an ethos, a passion. How we are is about applying the ethos, and that's the challenge. And who we are is about being that ethos, and that's the commitment. And like I said at the very beginning, and I keep saying throughout, challenge is the most accurate way to measure high performance, in my opinion. Thank you.
Rosie, thank you very much. There's a silent round of applause going on in here. That was incredibly inspirational, and I think your humility to come and talk about things that as you've done today are very telling. Your authenticity as a leader is absolutely apparent, and above and beyond anything else, if nothing else, you'll inspire a generation of young people, men and women, to follow in your footsteps. So, from all of us here in the team, thank you so much for coming along. That's absolutely fascinating insight into a different perspective on what we've been looking at, but also what we've all been talking about as well, and your parallels from what you drew out of this morning. I know you're going to stay on again today, and I really look forward to hearing some of the questions. There's some fascinating comments and questions that are coming to you from the audience. So really, really well done.